It's The World This Week. We're in the company of Anne Bagamary of the International New York Times. Let's say hello again to Pierre HASKI of a French news website, Rue 89, 89th Street, I guess you would translate it as. Franco-Syrian photojournalist Ammar RABBO, and from sister station, Radio France International, Elena SERVETTAZ. Just before the break, we were talking about that big press conference by Vladimir Putin that followed Tuesday's announcement of the Tuesday's fall of the ruble. On the day it finished down, I think 17%. It has firmed up a little bit towards the end of the week. Nonetheless, it's all on tenterhooks with the price of oil going down and sanctions biting. And Anne Bagamary, late Thursday, the White House signing a bill that allows the president to firm up sanctions.
Well, you could argue that, and we were talking about this before the break, that this is not the time to be reinforcing sanctions. This could push Putin to the brink, and it could cause reactions we don't want. Fact of the matter is that the markets, the free markets, are doing more to Putin than sanctions really ever could. I mean, if you look at the price of oil, it's fallen 40% this year, 22% just in the past month. The gyration of the ruble, that was the currency markets. Now, nobody, I think, would argue, honestly, that those markets are completely free, but they do reflect the will of investors to seek investments that will return good value on their money. And Russia is a terrible investment right now. That is what's putting pressure on Putin now. And there's not very much that the American president can or should do to interfere with that.
You agree, Ammar?
I don't know exactly the economical situation, but what is interesting from my side and from the Middle East, let's say, to watch what's happening in Russia, also what's happening in Iran with the there's also major crisis on the Iranian currency, and also the fall of the oil price. A lot of people are wondering if this will have real consequences on Syria. The main supports of Assad are Russia and Iran. So if they have other problems, if they have a real difficult economical and intern situation, will they continue supporting Assad? It costs a lot of millions, of course, every day.
A comment coming in on Facebook: Russia is a strong country, and Western countries can't play games with Putin.
I think it's not only about the sanctions. Somebody says that all this ruble story, it's our price for Crimea. I really don't think so, because it's our price for 15 years, not uncomfortable, political movement. When your budget is built by oil and gas for 50%, so you should be. And he in 2008 he told Russians that we should give it up and just to build something new, but we are in 2014, and we are still building our budget 50% from oil and gas. And
he admitted as much during the press conference.
Yes, and he thought we have a high harvest in this year, so let's try to survive with our harvest. So
back when he was talking about diversifying the economy, I think he gave that portfolio to Medvedev. Mm-hmm. He wanted his, at the time, I forget whether he was prime minister or president, but anyway, Medvedev was number 2. And he was the one who was supposed to encourage and sell Russia as a place for high-tech entrepreneurs to come. Happy home, we support small companies, this is going to diversify our economy. And it just didn't happen. Oil and gas, when it's high, is a very seductive commodity. Mm-hmm. And Putin has been doling out favors and money based on the fact that oil prices were high and getting higher. That's being undercut now. You have to think it's undercutting his power, or will undercut it eventually. Again, this has nothing to do with sanctions. This has to do with world commodity markets. Maybe it has to do something with fracking, because now America produces more hydrocarbons than it consumes, and a lot of other countries do too. So that has a way of depressing oil prices on the world market. It's going to be very interesting to see how all of geopolitics plays out against a backdrop of cheaper oil. This is going to, as you were saying, this is going to cause shifting alliances in a lot of different countries, not just Russia.
Sandra on Facebook: Putin's only defense is to blame the West. His overblown ego will not allow him to accept blame. The reaction of Western Europe right now, I mean, there was on Thursday an EU summit in Brussels. There was no talk of more stepped up sanctions. Do you see, Pierre HASKI, divergence now between Washington and Europe when it comes to handling Putin?
Well, not yet, but there are moves in Europe to have a kind of diplomatic approach to Putin. I mean, François Hollande was in Moscow only 10 days ago on his way back from Kazakhstan and was, giving peace a chance as it goes. And it seems also Germany has this ambivalent position all the time about how to deal with Russia. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Putin moves in Ukraine in the next few days. There's been this ceasefire, so-called ceasefire, that has been very fragile, but there are talks that are scheduled. Whether he pulls on the brakes or he pulls on the accelerator in Ukraine will probably shape the things to come in the relations between Russia and the West. And there, the people who want to have a softer approach to Russia and try to stop the course of the so-called new Cold War will speak up. Because the problem is that we are engaged in a very weird Cold War where nobody wants it. Who is prepared to fight for Ukraine today in the West? Is any of the NATO countries ready to go to war if it comes to that? Look at the way the Europeans have been reacting to the economic sanctions. Not exporting our cheese to Russia has been a kind of drama for many companies in France. Not to talk about the warships that are being built for Russia. And I think a lot of people would be pretty much relieved if things were back to normal business with Russia.
Ammar Abdrabbo, on that point, and you mentioned earlier how there's implications when you're talking about Iran, when you're talking about Syria. Russia, a foe of the West when it comes to Ukraine and Syria, a friend of the West when it comes to nuclear negotiations with Iran. It's a giant Rubik's Cube at this point. If Pierre HASKI's point about how if Ukraine can be toned down, it'll solve a lot of problems. What will it solve when it comes to Syria?
Probably to push Bashar to negotiate or to stop shelling civilian areas and to think maybe of some other solution for later. For the moment, Russia and Iran have been always on the same line. It is Bashar and nothing else, or Bashar against terrorism or something like that. So of course, they could be a way to look at the situation in a different way, at least. Yes. Can
Vladimir Putin, has he talked himself into a corner? Can he back down gracefully when it comes to Ukraine?
There's a different speeches. When Minister Lavrov gave France 24 interview, he said that Poroshenko is the best choice for Ukrainians. And during the press of Vladimir Putin, the speech was completely different because he blamed Kiev authorities in what's going on in Donbass today. So I'm not sure that they will just abandon this situation. And this act for free Ukraine that President Obama signed into a bill, they withdrew the position which would give Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova the status of how we say that's allies outside of NATO. This is very important, I think.
But what do you think about specifically about Middle East? It's not as important as Ukraine, is it?
For him?
Yes.
It is important.
Yeah,
of course.
As much as Ukraine.
But you have all the elements of a big negotiation where between Ukraine, Iran, Syria, the Islamic State. You have this weird situation where the Russia and the West are, as you said, on the negotiating with Iran together. They have the same enemy when it comes to the jihadists. I mean, Russia has its own problems with jihadists. And they are on different sides on what happens in Syria itself with Russia backing Assad. So whether there can be a big bargain and a big realignment or negotiation with Putin being weaker today, I wouldn't exclude that.
And we are inviting North Korea later for our victory day next year. You see?
All right, so there's the question of whether or not Vladimir Putin can save face. There's also I guess you could turn the question around the other way, Anne Bagamary. With the current climate in Washington, can the U.S. let him save face? Can they allow him to bow out gracefully when it comes to Ukraine?
Oh, I think so. If it's a weakened Putin who can be brought to the table to discuss even Ukraine, let's leave aside the rest, which would be everybody's dream to have all of our problems solved at once. But let's just say he could be brought to the table to discuss the stalemate in Ukraine and the situation in his own sphere. I think Washington can find a way. Look, Putin's going to have to find a way to climb down from some of the positions he's taken. He's going to have to style any kind of concession that he makes politically as something that's good for Russia and is consistent with what he has done before. That's a pretty fancy dance to do. I think that Washington will also have to do a fairly fancy dance, but I think they can do it. I think they can make this look like a victory all around.
If we want to be optimistic, and if we're talking about Cold War, you know that, I mean, we all remember that the highest peak of the Cold War was Cuba. In '62,
Right.
And Cuba yesterday so maybe we're really turning a page into something else.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see. We'll see whether that happens. I know there was a front page editorial in French conservative daily Le Figaro, which said that while one Cold War is being ended, another one is being rekindled when it comes to Russia. Is it really a Cold War?
It's presented like such in Russia. I mean, they speak about walls. They speak about, even when Hollande came, they mentioned this wall several times. And yesterday during his speech in front of the nation. So each time we have this external enemy. For him, it's very, very important.
Before we go, there was this week this shocking attack that took place in Pakistan. With 149 people killed, most of them school children, some of them shot in the head. Now, we had the day before in Sydney, Australia, the world captivated by a person who may or may not have been psychologically unstable, who held hostages. That finished badly with at least with 3 people killed. But when it came to Pakistan, this wasn't a mentally unbalanced person. This was something that was carefully thought out. Ammar RABBO, what explanation is there for this?
Well, it's too. I cannot give any explanation for such a criminal act, but it's what really came to my mind when I saw these terrible news and images is that it reminds us also that the main victims and the first victims of Al Qaeda, of the Islamic State, or of the Taliban, I mean, all these names for more or less the same movement, it reminds us that the first victims are Muslims. It is not a war of, I mean, as in France, Mr. Zemmour or other people talk, it's not a war of Muslims against the rest of the world. The first victims are Muslims. Was it in Syria? Was it in Pakistan? Was it in Algeria, etc.? Really, Muslims are killed by tens of thousands every year. And unfortunately, because of media, because of images, because of our role, I mean, we have to wonder about our main role. Unfortunately, one single event like the cafe in Australia hides, one tree hides the whole forest, and we have to be careful enough, and we have to be conscious that there is a forest and there are people dying, not because of war of religion, but because of a political struggle of one movement.
Comment on Facebook, Charles, the world mourns with you, Pakistan, and we've seen it really seems to be, at least for now, a seminal moment for Pakistan with the opposition calling off protests, the nation rallying.
Let's hope that's the case. I'm a little bit more skeptical that as horrific an act as this was, it really means that the government and the military are now going to put aside their differences and work together to fight jihadis. It's been too profitable up until now for there to be that tension at the top in Pakistan, for the government to advance its interests and the military to advance its interests separately. It'd be nice if this was the thing that brought them together. I'm not convinced that it is. Nor am I convinced that this means that, for example, the jihadists feel like they're under pressure, and so they had to take this terrible act to reassert themselves. It would be nice to think that. I have a feeling, though, that that's trying to pull some positive outcome out of a truly horrific situation.
A lot has been made about here in the West about homegrown jihadists and the allure of going to fight with this horrific massacre that took place in that school in Peshawar, and news that ISIS in Iraq had a significant loss this week on the battlefront, losing Mount Sinjar. Is that allure going to diminish?
I don't think so. I think if you have reached the point where you're thinking of joining such a group, that means you're ready to kill for it, and you're in a sectarian mood. That means the other side, the people who don't believe like you, should be killed because they are on your way. And as Ammar said, it's mostly other Muslims who don't share the radical views who are on the way. There was this terrific figure: 5,000 people died in the month of November from the different scenes of terrorism action based on radical jihad. 5,000, out of whom indeed there was one Frenchman, 3 Americans, and so on, and 4,900 and something were Muslims from Nigeria, from Syria, Iraq, or Pakistan, or other places. And that's really something we should indeed keep in mind, is that this war is first and foremost within Islam for the control of the minds and hearts of the Muslim world. And those who join it know what they're doing, and they're ready to kill. And I don't think that a defeat on one side or a massacre on the other, it's not the first massacre. There've been many before. Remember the Bring Back Our Girls, or remember the images from Iraq, the killings and so on. I don't think it has this repulsive effect that it has on us.
Also, there is a major problem. We know because we work about it, but it's always good to remind people of it, that a lot of people play with the fire. A lot of people who play with this movements. In Pakistan, of course, the role of the ISE, the Secret Service, playing with Taliban in Afghanistan to get this or to get that, or to finance their own war or their own lords. And today, unfortunately, maybe these people are paying in their own country the price. Yeah. And we have tens of examples of...
But do you have a sense, Ammar, that the momentum is shifting after the gains made by Kurdish Peshmerga forces in northern Iraq this week?
Unfortunately, I'm not that optimistic, because there is the battlefield and what's happening on the field. And of course, they can lose a lot. But there's also what Pierre mentioned, the battle in the mines. And unfortunately, in many countries where it seems that the jihadists were defeated on the ground, but you realize that they gained a lot in the mines, and that a lot of people are being Daeshized. I don't know if I can use this new word, and without weapons and without killing, but they are Daeshized in their daily life. They're gonna refuse this or that, or tell people to stop drinking, or to women to stop wearing this or that. And that's very complicated to win. That's a battle that it's our duty to fight it, but it's a long battle. It's not just Mount Sinjar or something else.
And can we say also that, the fundamentalists are winning one battle, at least, which is to polarize people. You mentioned earlier this French columnist who's written a best-selling book, Éric Zemmour. He gave an interview to an Italian newspaper in which he said that we should prepare for a civil war with Muslims in this country. In that respect, can we blame the fundamentalists for sparking this kind of hate speech?
They can be blamed, but they're also very happy with that kind of speech, because it goes exactly in their it fuels the hatred, it fuels the speech they love. It's very complicated today to talk about John Lennon's Imagine, but it's much easier to talk about this and to say, they're not like us, they're gonna kill us, they're gonna behead us, and to fuel hatred from many sides.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous to put a kind of Western goggles on to look at what's going on in Pakistan now with the as I said, it'd be nice to think that this will bring everybody together to fight what the West considers the enemy, which is fundamentalist jihadi. But it's not necessarily going to be that way. General Dempsey in the United States talked glowingly about the fact that this past week, 3 ISIS top commanders were killed. And fine, that's great, but how many heads does a snake have? It'd be nice to be able to declare a clean victory and say, we got him. We've done it. We've cut the head off a certain part of command and control, and so now we have the momentum. Every time you start reading about who's winning, who's losing in this war, you're putting a West point, you're putting an American or Western construct on what is fundamentally a very messy war that we don't really understand.
And I know that many journalists in like national corporation like BBC or RFI and I don't know from France Info were asked to be careful during covering this conflict. Even, for example, if a president uses this word Daesh, so you should take care. You should speak about so-called Islamic State. We should be careful with terms, with images, because if you remember from early beginning this story with ISIS, we saw many images with those in people in orange dresses being killed, and after we see quite nothing about it. So I think journalists are also need to be very careful.
Pierre HASKI?
Let's finish on a positive mode.
Please.
On Sunday, there's going to be the second round of the presidential election in Tunisia, the first free democratic election in Tunisia, which is the only spark that still shines in the post-Arab Revolution era. Right. And I was in Tunisia a couple of weeks ago, and despite all the problems, it's fragile, but it's standing, and they have these elections. They have faith in what they've been building. They've had a great constitutional process with the best constitution of the Arab world, and it is standing.
All right, may they convert the try come Sunday with that presidential election. People will finish on that happy note. Pierre HASKI, Elena SERVETTAZ, Ammar Abed-Rabbo, and Anne BAGAMERY.